Alright, so this is the second attempt I've made to record this video, having lost the first one to failing to record the audio. But this is my second intermediate lesson, specifically introducing Basic Bob. So this is Bob. He's basic. He plays Triple Triad. Is he any good at Triple Triad? He is actually pretty good at Triple Triad. He's just very basic. He thinks in a flowchart way, and our goal is to be at least as good as Bob. And I'm using Basic Bob as a stand-in for kind of having good fundamentals, just having a good basic sense of here's a good place to look, or here is a straightforward way to reason through each position. And what he really values is, he comes from what I talked about last time, which is we played the always captures game, and that gave us a sense of structure and a sense that securing is a lot more valuable than capturing. And so Bob comes from that understanding, and specifically he will always look at and evaluate as better moves that secure cards or moves that secure more cards. He's always going to be focusing on securing cards. Those will be the moves he looks at. He's not an amazing calculator. He can't calculate from 4 moves out, but he can calculate the last 3 moves of a game, so he has some calculation ability. That's probably a pretty decent calculator. And he focuses on securing cards, and when he can't secure cards, he focuses on making sure he has ways to attack the opponent's cards and setting up strong defensive cards of his own that he can recapture and hopefully his opponent can't. So here's a game, and we'll play through the rest of a game and just talk through how Basic Bob would think through each turn. And this is not supposed to be, this is the best thinking possible. It's supposed to be, here are good fundamental thoughts, here is a good basis for further thinking, and if you reach the level of Basic Bob thinking, I think you're just a pretty good player. Later in the series, I'll look at some games played by actual players that I have the records of, and they were, on average, somewhat below average tournament players, but of course tournament players was a very low percentage of the people that played on Triple Triad, and so overall clearly good players. And I think Basic Bob understandings play at a significantly higher level than they did in those games. So, okay, we've seen a starter, and Basic Bob's first basic question is, can I take their starter? And Basic Bob is going to be blue here on the right, and the answer is yes. Basic Bob can take it 2 different ways from 2, with either the 6327 or the 2636. And then he asks, can they take back? And the answer in this case is also yes. And at that point, because Bob does not want to concede a secure card, if he takes and they recapture, they have secured the card and won, and Bob really values secure cards, Bob now has no interest in taking their card. If the answer was no, they could not take back, Bob would take their card here. And I do want to point out, and I don't know how often I'll point this out, but ways to be better than Bob, ways to think further than Bob, which is, so Bob checks if he can take and if they can take back. But he doesn't check, for instance, if they could combo the way he takes. So for instance, pretend Bob could only take with the 6, 3, 2, 7, and 2. And pretend they had some way in 3 to combo back his card in 2, flipping both. Bob wouldn't notice that. He's not looking that far. And so one way to be better than Bob, and this is going to be true in lots of these lines, is just to look 1 move further. And a lot of the time, that extra move actually is, you should do it, it would be good to do, but a lot of the times, like here, he's still going to make it to what I think is a very good move, despite not looking that far, and that's kind of the strength of fundamentals, is even without this kind of deeper look into the position, he can find good things, and most of the time that deeper look won't help, though of course the times it will, it becomes very important. So here, Bob will not take their starter because he knows they can take back and secure a card, and the key of kind of good fundamentals is, I want to be securing, I don't want you to be securing. So the next question is, can we not take, right? Because we asked, can we take their starter? The answer here was yes, and we had that follow-up. But now, what if the answer was no? What if we couldn't have taken their starter? How would Bob think? Well, his first idea would be, I can't take their starter at all, so I would like to be able to take it from both sides, because currently I can't take it from either. And so the first place he would look is in 5. Can I set up to be able to take their starter both ways? And so we would then look, let's pretend we couldn't take their starter now. Can I set up a way to be able to take their starter both ways with a move in 5? And there are actually multiple ways to do here. One is the top card, 7, 6, 3, 2, and 5, sets up a same with the second card, 3, 2, 7, 6, and 2, and a plus with the fourth card, bomb, 2, 7, 6, 3, and 4. And So that's one way to set up captures from both sides. Another way would be the second card, 3, 2, 7, 6, and 5. It sets up a same with 7, 6, 3, 2, and 4, and it sets up a plus with 2, 7, 6, 3, and 2. And you can actually see here quite nicely how these 7, 6, 3, 2s really work well together to be able to combo against 7s and 6s on the opposing side. So if he couldn't take it all, he would then play one of those moves in 5 because he would want to be able to take their starter both ways. He would not be able to take it either way currently, and so he would set up to have access both ways. Now, in this case, that is obviously not needed because he can already take it one way, but I'm saying if he could not take it anyway, he would look to go in 5. But if he didn't have a move in 5, then he would have no way to set up against both sides. And he sees it. He doesn't think it's valuable to only be able to set up against one side, because if they then block that side, the card is now safe. So what he would do then, if he has no way to set up such that he can take both sides, is he would go in the far corner and start trying to build his own defenses. So he would play a move like 6, 3, 2, 7, and 9, which is the strongest corner available to him. It has a 6 and a 7 outfacing, and he can recapture it both ways. The 7, 6, 3, 2 or the 2, 6, 3, 6 can plus wall it from 8, and the 3, 2, 7, 6 can overpower it from 6. And so he would play the strongest corner that he can recapture, or even if he couldn't recapture it, if the opponent couldn't capture it at all, he would still go for that. But his core idea is, if I can take your starter, I check to make sure whether or not you can take back. And if I can't take your starter, I look to go in 5 because that's the only way I might be able to set up against both sides. And if that doesn't work, I start trying to set up a defense of my own in the opposite corner, which in this case is 9. Now, none of this has answered our move here because in this case, we know we can take, but they can take back. So we haven't gotten to a move yet, which leads us to question 2. Can I take both ways? And if we can take both ways, then Bob will say, okay, I can already deal with your starter, but I don't want to capture it now because you'll recapture and secure. I don't need to set up further against it, so I don't need to play in a square that can set up sames or pluses on it. So what I'm going to do is the same as what we just saw, which is I'll go in the far corner with the strongest card I can put there that I can retake if needed, and where I don't use up any of the cards I need to take your starter. But again, that doesn't help us here, because in this case, we know we can take one way, but not the other. So this doesn't apply to the current situation, but I'm just kind of giving his reasoning, which is very much, I want to be able to take both ways. If I already can, I'll just go in the far corner. If I can't and cannot possibly set up for that, I'll also go in the far corner and start trying to build up a strong defensive corner of my own. But if I can take it partially, I'm going to start setting up to make sure I can take it both ways, which brings us to what's left, which is Bob can only take one way in 2, so Bob wants to set up to be able to take the other way from 4. And there are 2 squares that can set up to do so, right? We need a square that 4 touches so we can set up a same or a plus, and the only 2 squares that do so are 5 or 7. And he'll prefer 7 because he doesn't need 5. He doesn't need to set up for 2. He only needs to set up for 4. 7 is the square that most directly does that. So he wants to play in 7. If there was no such move in 7 that set up a card in 4 to be able to take the opponent's starter, he would go in 5 instead. But here, he's going to go 7. So which card to play in 7, and you can look, though I wrote on the side, so maybe I shouldn't have gone to this slide yet, but which cards set up Bob to be able to have a capture in 4? So one is 3, 2, 7, 6 in 7. Sets up a same with 7, 6, 3, 2, and a plus with 2, 7, 6, 3, and 4. So that would give 2 different ways, 2 different cards that could be put there in order to capture their starter. And then the other way is 6, 3, 2, 7 in 7, sets up 2, 6, 3, 6 to have a plus in 4. So Bob's reasoning now, when choosing, both of these moves accomplish what I want. I want to play in 7. I figured that out. I want to have that move in 7 set up a combo threat such that I can take the card in 1. Figured that out. 2 different cards do so. Which one do I prefer? And there are kind of 2 different reasonings he employs. One is he prefers sames, right? If he's going to same or plus, he wants to set up the same first. because in case of a same, if they can somehow combo stuff back, it won't flip extra cards, because of course combo relies on overpowering, and sames guarantee that there won't be overpowering, because the 7 will be matched with a 7, the 3 will be matched with a 3. So he's going to go for the move here that sets up a same rather than sets up a plus, which means he's going to go with 3, 2, 7, 6, and 7. If that didn't decide, he would then go, what's the strongest corner, making sure he can recapture it, but what's the strongest corner? Because as we saw in the capture game, first turn in the capture game, where every play automatically captures any card it's touching, first turn wins by force. Not by a lot, 6-4, but first turn wins by force. And so one understanding he got from that Basic Bob has, is at some point we either need to trick them into making a formationally incorrect move, or we need to play something that first turn is not capable of capturing. And that means he's going to be drawn to strong corners, and that's why in so much of the thinking so far, he's wanted to go in the far corner and play a strong corner there and build up from there. Because at some point, we have to make sure first turn cannot capture something they want to, or we have to convince them to make a formationally incorrect move. Now, combo complicates that somewhat, but he still has that core feeling. And thus, here he's going to go with the move that sets up a same, but if that wasn't deciding for him, and maybe it isn't for you, maybe you think this other value is more important, he'll look to play as strong corners as he can, because he wants to make it as difficult as possible for his opponent to take his stuff. So the move, sorry about the change in background, very unprofessional videos, is 3, 2, 7, 6, and 7, because this is the move that sets up a same. And I think this is a really good move. I think often Bob plays really well, and there are a number of points during the reasoning process where you could say you didn't consider moves here, or you could have calculated a little further and made sure something down the road works. And Bob's not doing any of that, but I think Bob can reach a pretty high level and make pretty good moves with a straightforward type of reasoning that I think people should be able to emulate and reach a pretty good level. And I know I did. I know a lot of these were the understandings I had when I first came over to Open, and I was immediately quite good and solidified some of this stuff and got better, and eventually I made jumps beyond it. But I think I was a pretty good player when I was basically Basic Bob. So yeah, I think there are ways to extend upon his reasoning, but I also often think just figuring out what the Basic Bob move is in a position gives you like a pretty good feel for the position, and then you can hopefully find better moves in some spots. Though in some spots, like here, I think he just plays a very good move. But just being able to play the Basic Bob move is pretty good, and being able to improve on that is really strong. Basic Bob does not cover all types of thinking. I think there are styles you can build up that have not very much to do with what Basic Bob does, but I do think it's useful fundamentals. So in reply here, the opponent plays 2, 6, 3, 6, and 4, and Bob thinks, can I secure? And his core strategy is going to always be securing. He's always going to look to secure. And here, I did not write correctly in the side thing. There are two moves that fully secure a card. Right, a card is fully secure not just if it's surrounded because combo is on, but also if none of the numbers facing towards it are higher than its outfacing numbers. So no matter what's comboed, it still won't get flipped. So one way to secure a card is 7, 6, 3, 2, and 8, right? Because we already control the card in 7, so we don't have to flip it, and it has a 2 facing towards that card, and that card has high enough values that no matter what is comboed, it will never be flipped, and we'd secure the card in 7. The other way to secure is 2, 6, 3, 6, and 2, comboing and flipping the card in 1. Note that 6, 3, 2, 7, and 2 captures the card in 1, but does not secure it because potentially they could combo that card somewhere down the road. So if there are multiple ways to secure, he's going to choose the one with the most same type synergy, followed by plus type synergies. So he's going to prefer, 2, 6, 3, 6, and 2 over something that overpowers something it's touching, so it could potentially be comboed back. So here he's going to play 2, 6, 3, 6, and 2 because that secures the card in 1, and that seems the most useful card here to secure, and he can do it with a plus wall such that he is not overpowering the card in 1, so he is safe from combos back. So Bob secures and flips 2 cards because of combo and now leads 7-3. Now here, Bob isn't winning, and his opponent will find a tie, but it's pretty clear this position is very good for Bob. He's gotten a large advantage out of the opening, and whether or not it's convertible depends on, the opponent's hand and other stuff, but he's clearly the one pressing here. And from the first move, I think Bob, against a quite good hand, applied a lot of pressure and reached a very advantageous position. His opponent plays in 5, flipping 2 cards, making the score 5-5 with a plus. And for Bob, always be securing, right? His first instinct, some people would calculate out the rest of the game. Bob isn't capable of calculating with 4 moves left. That's fine. So his question is just, which squares can I secure cards? And by definition here, the only squares that can secure cards are 3 and 8. The card in 8 can secure the card in 7, and a card in 3 can secure the card in 2. And then as a tiebreaker, he'll say, which can be safe? And he cannot safely take the card in 2 from 3, but he can safely keep the card in 7 with a play in 8. So he's going to play the move in 8, and he's going to play the safe one, and that move is 2, 7, 6, 3, and 8. Now, there's some argument, if you wanted to look at this, for playing a different card in 8, even without calculating any further, because other cards in 8 could flip the card in 5, and that card with its outward 7 is going to be safe too. So there are arguments for other moves, but Bob is very focused on this securing idea. It's not fully secured because Bob could potentially be comboed, but as you can see from the opponent's hand, as fewer cards are left, you can just check, can their cards currently combo? They cannot. It's kind of unlikely for them to be able to be set up to combo at this point. So the card in 8, I think, is pretty strong and basically secures the card in 7. Now, Basic Bob is second turn, so it's not his job to find a move here, but there are 3 moves left, so this is the moment where Basic Bob could start calculating. And there are 24 potential ways for the game to end. There are 6 different moves Red could play at this turn. There are 2 cards for 3 squares, so 6 moves. Each of those, there are going to be 4 possible replies, and the final move of a game is always forced, because the first turn player, there is 1 square and 1 card. So 6 times 4 times 1 equals 24. There are 24 possible ways for the game to end. And you can just brute force them. And I do think that seems exhausting to newer players and hard to do. It does get faster, and you get a better feel for which squares to look, right? So if you're looking to win or tie as Red, a move that's kind of unlikely to be good based on this always be securing principle is, say, a move in 9 here, right? Because what it does is it secures the card in 8 for the opponent. And again, we've switched to Red's perspective here. We're trying to figure out, how does the end of the game, does Red have a tie, or can they even win? But in this case, it's, can Red manage a tie? And so, for instance, a move like 6-2, 6-3, and 8, which actually doesn't actually lose, but looks kind of ridiculous because it only secures a card for the opponent, and it sets up a plus for 7-6-3-2. So that would be a move that's like unlikely to hold the tie, right? And there are going to be moves like that that can be discarded pretty quickly. 3, 2, 7, 6, and 9 is actually a little better, but also ties. And then moves in 5, if they set the opponent up to have combos, are going to be pretty unlikely. So, for instance, 3, 2, 7, 6, or stuff that can't be taken back. So something like 3, 2, 7, 6, and 6, that has a 7 down. Blue can't take that back from 9, so that just loses really badly because the opponent goes in 3, flipping 2, and they're up 6-4, and we can't take anything back. So there are going to be moves, the more you calculate, that the more you dismiss as like, this is just very unlikely to be the move, which are the moves that have the best chance to tie. So for instance, a very logical move is 3, 2, 7, 6, and 3, right? This secures the card, basically secures the card in 2. It is quite strong in itself, and it turns out that's a good tie. Any move the opponent makes in response to that move in 3, say they go in 9, will lose. Our 6-2, 6-3 can flip both their cards and we'll win 6-4. Again, we're on Red's perspective now. And their only tie against that move is 6-3, 2-7, and 6, which will flip the card in 3 due to plus wall, and then we flip the card back by going in 9. So I think that's probably the most logical tie. There are lots of ties, but I think if you don't have the logic of how these endgames work, then you should just brute force everything. But brute forcing everything starts indicating, this type of move is where the tire win is likely to be, and you start being a lot quicker to spot it and not having to spend so much time on moves that are just very unlikely to work. And I think it just comes with practice, but I also think it comes with the kind of idea of like, we still just want to be securing, always be securing. What's a logical square to go to lock something in? 3. Can I play a card that's a strong corner in 3? Yeah, I can. 3, 2, 7, 6 is a pretty strong corner, and it kind of locks in the card in 2. And it doesn't give up any combos to the opponent. And they can plus wall it, and then we take back, and it's a tie. So this is kind of the basic Bob method, and I think it kind of has 4 core parts. I hope I'm counting correctly. The first is basic Bob always is looking to secure. He doesn't want to let the opponent secure cards. He always wants to secure for himself. In the 6th move of that game, he only looked at moves in 3 or 8 because those are the only moves that can secure. And yes, if you're a better player, you know there's chances there are good moves in the other squares, but 90% of the time, the best move in those positions is in 3 or 8. And Bob will find, or has a very good chance to find those moves, even though he can't calculate out the rest of the game. And the second skill Bob has is he can calculate out the rest of a game with 3 moves left. And I think that's kind of a good baseline to work towards, which is just to make sure with 3 moves left that you can at least calculate those out every time. And that'll mean you can sometimes calculate out with 4 left, sometimes you'll even have a chance to see the key line with 5 moves left. But if you can calculate every time the game out with 3 moves left, and you have a good feel for the logic of securing and not allowing securing, then I think you have a pretty good chance to be a very strong player. Obviously, if you can calculate further, that's fantastic. Then I think the third trait is when he doesn't have something else to do, he will start trying to build up safety for himself, start trying to build up stuff the opponent can't take. And as we'll see in the next video, he will build hands around strong corner starters that he can recapture and hopefully they can't. And when he doesn't have a way to attack the opponent's starter, he will start looking, okay, I don't have any way to secure yet. I don't want to take their starter if they can secure it. So I want to start building up security of my own. And then the 4th trait was specifically in how he responded to the starter was he wants to make sure he can take their starters. And so if he can't take it anyway, he looks for moves in 5, the only square that can set him up to take both ways. If he can take it one way but not the other, he will often play in the adjacent corner to make sure he can also take the other way. And I think this is a good kind of checklist of things to look at for figuring out how to respond to a corner starter. And I think Basic Bob is just a really good example of solid fundamental play.